Hello again, my friends, and today I will be making my German factory set that is filled with many remnants of unfinished paper panzer pieces, as well as this E50 paper panzer that is stopped for repairs. And for constructing this, I used this construction foam set from AK, as you may also find this stuff at a department store, as in like insulation foam. It was just very nice to cut through, and which I prefer over the styrofoam that you may find that is very messy and maybe a little bit harmful to the ears, as well as unpleasant. But see, as I can easily cut through this, and placing the items on top of it will help give me a rough idea of how I want the placement to be for later on, as you might see. For creating a rubble pile, I will be using this Fast and Final speckle that will help fill up any holes on a wall, but at least in this case, we'll be using it to create our rubble pile. As you can see, it is a very nice light white acrylic texture, which is very fun to mess with and play with, almost like Play-Doh. And later you will see that we add on some bricks, some other small little ballast and texture to help it make it look like rubble. To help fix together the fine texture detail on this rubble pile, I will use super glue to help make sure it will never move and not be affected after the painting process, as you might see later on. I used this Loctite super glue, which actually ended up eating through the blue foam, as you might see later on, that it unfortunately chewed through it and left a little hole that is very obvious. But we ended up using that to our advantage, as you might see towards the end of the video. But here I ended up adding some of the ballast and small bricks to help add that random texture all around the factory floor, as bricks and other bits and stuff would have been flying everywhere since this is a bombed out factory. But here you also see me use another version of super glue that luckily is not strong enough to eat through the blue foam, and is very helpful for just adding on little plastic items like this bit from an E50 model I did in my last video. But now we can begin spray painting it, as not with a primer but with a black shadow, pretty much with this black spray can as you saw there, is going to help hide any little details that I may have missed from this shadow effect, as later I will also use the main base coat color that you will see in a minute. Now we can begin to use this Vallejo gray surface primer that some of you may be familiar with in my brush paint video, as it is very helpful for just brush painting on the main base coat color, as in the factory floor was almost in a white gray color, but you don't want it to be pure white, especially since it's going to be heavily weathered and covered in a lot of dust and maybe some dried up mud from the E50 vehicle, especially with lots of items and other bits being tossed around, since it is supposed to be a very messy and dirty factory floor. And for other extra texture, as you can skip the step if you want to, but I just did it just out of reassurance, just to make sure that I didn't miss any parts or areas to where it would have been too clean and white. But as well as, this is probably the only time you'll see me use an enamel wash from Tamiya, as I've had this since I created my channel, and it has been with me for the longest of time, and this is basically its only purpose now, as you can see here, just for creating some pre-shadowing effects, as I want to reapply on some more white paints, or maybe more white light gray paints, essentially, just so it'll help give us an idea. As you can obviously see, I was still experimenting with how I wanted this model or diorama to turn out in the end. Now I can use this Vallejo white plastic putty for filling up, obviously, for gaps and small little holes that you might see here, for also in creation of effect of texture on the factory floor. I then apply a dark brown wash to certain areas where I want certain stains or maybe a fake shadow effect to help accentuate certain parts of the diorama. As you can see, I do it for the rubble pile and for other parts of the factory floor to where I want certain stains or maybe some dried up mud to be, as you know, this is an abandoned place to where it is still sort of active, but it has taken in some rainwater as well as some other very messy and filthy environment. I then use saddle brown, flat red, buff, neutral gray, olive green, and dark green, all from Vallejo, as the dark green and model air olive green are very nice and smooth when applying on to the wheels you see there, as well as using buff, also being mixed in with white, as you can see for one of the armor platings on the gun mantlets you see there next to the gun barrel, as well as using just plain buff for certain parts of other pieces to help give it some nice, interesting color variation on the diorama, and as well as for the exploded and torn up extra pieces of shrapnel or any blown up parts of the factory, I use for neutral gray, as it would be very nice in contrast with the rust effects, and as well as maybe some of the parts that are more dusty, as you will see later on. For our light dust effect, I used this fine weathering pastel from Mr. Hobby, which I believe is a Japanese company, and they have a very nice, very fine pigment that is already pre-grounded up in their bottle, and it'll give us a very nice light dust effect, as you can see here, giving it nice little dusty spots and other covered areas to where rubble may have collapsed and smashed on the floor, to where it would have created so much dust from some of the roof and the wall caving in. For our water effects, I want to use this realistic resin water so that I can mix it in with my Tamiya dark brown mixture, as I'll show you here in a minute, so to give us some nice wet stains, as the roof would have been damaged from the bombing done by the Allied bombers, as obviously some rainwater would have been dripped in, as well as some other stains, some from possibly fuel or from other effects that would have left the floor in a very messy state, as you can see as it is now. I'd like to give a huge special thanks and a big shout out to another fellow modeler who goes by the name of Plastic Panzer Factory. And I'd like to thank him so much for gifting me his brush painted E100 model, as well as Little Hans you see here. And I really appreciate the fact that he brush painted the E100, as not too many people would do that, since I know he has an airbrush. But thank you again, my friend. I hope you all enjoyed the final end results as much as I did, as this is pretty much my first ever diorama. And I'll hopefully see you all next time.